Sam's out for Passover, obviously, and he's also out because, the universe just says when news is as big as possible, it needs to fall on me hosting solo. And we have the extra sweetener of it just being myself and Bradley in studio because Matt is still on grand jury duty.
Sam's timing as it relates to huge breaking news developments coinciding with his absence is becoming almost surgical at this point.
Almost suspicious. I mean, we were suspicious when Rush Limbaugh died and Sam was out of town. Curiously. Very curiously. Not making any accusations.
Afghanistan withdrawal, Sam on vacation.
The invasion of Ukraine, Sam on vacation. And, Trump's, the true fallout from his arraignment really is going to fall on Wednesday, today, because he was in court yesterday, as I'm sure people listening or watching understand. Trump has become the first U.S. president to be criminally charged. And he's also the first president to be impeached twice. So breaking records all over the place. This all got started, just to backtrack a second, because hush money payments in and of themselves, not necessarily illegal, right? And that's what you'll hear from right-wing commentators, or what you won't hear from them, I should say, because they're trying to make it just about the surface level hush money payments. But how the ball got rolling here is that there was a report in 2018 from the Wall Street Journal which spoke about the hush money payment. That caused greater sunlight to be to shine on this case, because Trump then also violated the NDA by then speaking about it publicly. And so then Stormy Daniels sues Donald Trump. The lawsuit just opens this case up. And then you have Michael Cohen, who gets investigated, lies to investigators, ends up going to jail, ends up going to prison, I should say. And now we're at this point where the case is being explored as thoroughly as it can be. Cohen admits that Trump lied about the records of the payment, calling it legal fees. That's a federal tax violation if proven in court. And that's when this case began to unfold. Here's Alvin Bragg yesterday, after Trump appeared in court, explaining his reasoning behind the, again, 34 felony counts being leveled at the former president.
Why did Donald Trump repeatedly make these false statements? The evidence will show that he did so to cover up crimes relating to the 2016 election. Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated, Mr. Cohen, and others agreed in 2015 to a catch and kill scheme. That is, a scheme to buy and suppress negative information to help Mr. Trump's chance of winning the election. As part of this scheme, Donald Trump and others made 3 payments to people who claimed to have negative information about Mr. Trump. To make these payments, they set up shell companies, and they made yet more false statements, including, for example, in AMI, American Media Incorporated's business records. One of the 3 people that they paid to keep quiet was a woman named Stormy Daniels. Less than 2 weeks before the presidential election, Michael Cohen wired $130,000 to Stormy Daniels' lawyer. That payment was to hide damaging information from the voting public. The participant scheme was illegal. The scheme violated New York election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. The $130,000 wire payment exceeded the federal campaign contribution cap, and the false statements in AMI's books violated New York law. That is why Mr. Trump made false statements about his payments to Mr. Cohen.
There you go. And there were some other revelations in the indictment, including, and when AMA, the corporation that Bragg keeps referring to, is associated with the National Enquirer, the tabloid that was participating in the catch and kill schemes on behalf of Trump.
And seemingly one of the big notable witnesses for the grand jury was David Pecker, who was the CEO of AMI.
Yes, or AMI.
The parent
Did I
company.
say AMA?
Yeah, AMI.
Ask me anything.
Here we are. The parent company of the National Enquirer. So I think, of course, as this potentially or will go to trial, I think Pecker will certainly be a pretty prominent witness for
which is interesting. Yeah, they've made it clear that it's not just Cohen, that they have other people who are speaking about
that Cohen is not like entirely the linchpin of the people are of course considering him the star witness because he was Trump's fixer for so long, but Bragg seems to be telegraphing that he's not the only source for what they're going after here.
And I think it would be irresponsible for that to be the case. So I concede that's definitely there are definitely going to be more witnesses on this front. And the National Enquirer, I mean, God, the fact that they're involved in this is hilarious given I'm sure all of you have seen it at supermarket checkout counters. It's about aliens and fake Paul McCartneys and things like that. But this was also the tabloid that ran the story accusing Ted Cruz's father of being a part of the assassination of JFK, which then Trump ran with in the 2016 primary. So there was a symbiotic relationship at play here.
And sorry, just before we continue to get to the more serious stuff, I just want to point out what David Pecker looks like with a guy whose name is David Pecker.
Oh, wow. Okay. So he looks like Geraldo Rivera, except if Geraldo Rivera was a wasp who also is like a serial cheater.
Yeah, like, would anybody else be named David Pecker and also be the head of the company that publishes the National Enquirer and not look like this guy?
Is that who's that a picture of with him down there? I mean, he's just with Playboy models all over the place here.
Shockingly, with some dubious repute.
Yeah, he really looks like an extra in the background of like some sort of biopic about Hugh Hefner.
Right, or Boogie Nights or something like that. Like a Laurel Canyon thing.
He's a Boogie He's like the Boogie Nights guy that brings the underage girl to the party and then she ODs. Right. That's the vibe that you get from Pecker there. And one of the catch and kill stories from that was Trump allegedly paid $30,000 to a doorman at his building to squash a story about him having an illegitimate child, which seems to have been proven false later. But I mean, it could have been true. It just doesn't seem like it is true based on what we know from the indictment. But here's more of Alvin Bragg explaining some of these charges against Trump regarding the falsification of business records, because as I mentioned earlier, right-wing commentators are going to try and make this all about, it's just an exchange of money between a woman and a man, and that in and of itself is not illegal. Bragg explains why that's a kind of surface level reading of it and not entirely the case.
My office, including the talented prosecutors you saw at arraignment earlier today, has charged hundreds of felony falsifying business records. This charge, it can be said, is the bread and butter of our white-collar work. At its core, this case today is one with allegations like so many of our white-collar cases. Allegations that someone lied again and again to protect their interests and evade the laws to which we are all held accountable. As this office has done time and time again, we today uphold our solemn responsibility to ensure that everyone stands equal before the law. No amount of money and no amount of power changes that enduring American principle.
So that is undoubtedly true, that the going after these kinds of white-collar crimes, falsifying records, usually that's how they can get white-collar criminals, because there's a paper trail for that. But for the most part, since our justice system's a bit more tied up in, locking up people for the consequences of their poverty, they don't go into that too much. But when they do, it's a really easy wedge into larger white collar crime. So I think that's one of the strengths of the case, that there's a real pattern of behavior that you can show here. Trump's a crook, right? Like, this is the fact that there's 34 counts show this happened many times, and he's going to be a little bit afraid about what else this opens up, because this was routine business for a guy like Trump. And it shows too that Trump, when he ran in 2016, he wasn't really trying to win, because if you were a politician that when he initially started, I should say, he was like, this will be great for my business. I'm in the spotlight. I'll make some more money. He didn't have his crap buttoned up. That's why this was so patchwork, him having to make these hush money payments on the fly. So he created this situation by having a shady past and then choosing to run for president as a PR exercise, and then having to fix itself with his fixer Michael Cohen on the back end. But yeah, they're going to be able to show that there's a pattern of behavior. As Bradley just spoke about, it's not just the testimony of Michael Cohen. There's other witnesses. There is the paper trail, the documentation in the ledger, the fact that falsifying records is such a well-established crime that is pursued by these kinds of prosecutors in a variety of different white-collar criminal instances. And there is this unique angle to it as well, which is that it's not just the bookkeeping fraud, which is usually a misdemeanor. Bragg is indicating that he's raising this to the level of a felony because he seems to believe that he and his team can prove that the bookkeeping fraud was in service of covering up a second crime. That's how you can push it from a misdemeanor up to a felony. And that second crime appears to be campaign finance violation. So I think that that stuff is where the case is, from my reading of it, from what we know, pretty strong. But people are pointing out that there are some thin details surrounding the case that I don't know if that's a prosecutorial decision in terms of strategy, or if there is not as much there as they're trying to show. Like, as I said, we all know Trump's a crook. I just want to see if some of this can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. I said this on the show yesterday as well. Ellie Mistal wrote about this in The Nation. There are weaknesses to this, in that bookkeeping fraud and campaign finance violations have a 5-year statute of limitations in New York. Bragg's going to argue that the pandemic should extend that, and that also that Trump was out of state when he was president, so there's a pause in that statute of limitations. But that's going to be something that Trump's lawyers poke holes in, right? And that can apply to, from what we see now, all of these charges here. And the second is that the decision to raise it to the level of felonies means that there could be an opportunity for Trump's lawyers to say, now these are actually just misdemeanors. You can't prove this connection. I'm not sure. We'll have to see if that plays out in court or how it plays out, but it still makes it a higher bar a little bit. So I'm fascinated to see how this plays out. What also is scary for Trump is that this is not the only legal tangle that he's in right now. We know the Georgia election interference case is moving forward. We know that the special counsel investigation into his hoarding of classified documents is moving forward, and that he just had a setback because his request to block his aides from testifying has been denied. I mean, no one knows how this is going to play out, and I don't want to pretend that I do. I do know that his poll numbers have gone up in the Republican primary, and he gave a speech last night that seems to indicate that he thinks that this is a win for him, which says a lot about the Republican base. But God, it was cathartic, let's be real, to see Trump in that courtroom, even the little glimpse that we got of him yesterday.